My friends and I love to hike all kinds of mountain ranges. It's been our hobby throughout our 20s, and one of the most fulfilling things in my life. Jason, Barnes, and Cassie took some convincing to really start tagging along. Jason didn't like getting his expensive clothes dirty. Barnes enjoyed his bed too much, and Cassie just hated exercise of any kind. Thankfully, I was able to convince them, and now we go on smaller hikes on weekends and larger excursions during the summer. And this was our big one for the year. No matter how much I've gotten them to see the enjoyment of it, they still send questions and complaints my way. But I like to think my thirst for adventure is contagious, so it's easy enough to talk them down. Tell me again why we don't just stick to the trail like we're supposed to. You said it, Jason. That's exactly why we don't stay on the trail. Because we're supposed to. Nothing in life is worth anything if you're just doing the same things that other people have done, walking the same paths. The only time people find anything incredible is when they are somewhere they aren't supposed to be, somewhere other people have never dared to go. Inspiring, Casey says behind me, punching my back. Mr. Philosopher. You could have just been honest, Barnes says beside me. You always hate anyone telling you what to do. It's been 2 days since we saw our last trail marker, venturing deeper into the mountains of Oregon, and we've trekked through thickly forested areas where the branches and leaves above seem to blot out the sky. Barnes makes use of the machete he brought with him, hacking away at vines and shrubs that are barely in our way. It mostly just seems like he wants to get some use out of it, even if it's entirely unnecessary. He leads the pack, swinging his blade around with more gusto than was needed. But we let him have his fun. We venture deeper and deeper into the mountains and into the dense forest, leaving other hikers and campers far behind us. While they follow markers and stick to their trail, we dare to go beyond and find new things, where we can make unique and unforgettable memories. It's just nice having my friends out here, leading the way through the brush of the woodlands. Maybe I finally convinced them that these ventures off the beaten path are worth it. Something snags my foot, and I'm suddenly flat on my stomach on the ground. There's a strange sound to my side when I land. The others all turn back to check on me. Are you all right? Of course, I'm good. I feel my face growing hot from embarrassment and glance back as I climb to my feet. It was probably just some root sticking out. I should be more careful with my footing. I look back, but there is no root protruding from the earth or sticking out from any of the trees around me. I crouch down and look at where I had been walking and find a thin thread of rope stretched out between two trees, right where I had walked. I reach over and take hold of the strange thread that's suspended over the ground. I pull it a little as I look at both trees it's connected to. What is that? Barnes asks, crouching beside me. It takes a second for me to even hear him. My mind races with thoughts as I start following the thread toward one of the trees. I have no idea. It definitely didn't grow here, though. Someone put this here. I reach one of the trees and find the source of the sound I heard when I fell. There is a low-tech tool made of sticks suspended from the tree trunk that almost looks like wind chimes. But when I look at it for a moment, something clicks in my head. It's an alarm. An alarm? Jason scoffs. To alert what? I wouldn't panic, Barnes says, trying to speak calmly but failing to hide the fear in his voice. Some kid probably made this and left it here. It could have been here for years. Decades even. Who knows? Yeah. I can hear the nervousness in Cassie's voice while she tries to be hopeful. Yeah, that's probably it. Maybe, I respond skeptically. I'm hardly convinced. I start to look around the surrounding area, watching my step as I carefully wander around some of the trees. Sure enough, there are other trees that have thin, inconspicuous ropes tethered between them right above the ground, just like the one I tripped over. They are all set up and waiting to be pulled to activate the old wood chimes. This is ridiculous, Jason says, and pulls one of the strings hard. I really wish he didn't do that. I stay still and glance around, listening to the sound of that wood chime echo through the surrounding trees. We're worrying about nothing. This is just some prank some hiker or camper pulled when they were bored. Maybe. I scan the surrounding area, waiting for something that I can't be sure is even there. I probably look ridiculous, expecting to find someone alerted by those contraptions. Of course, nobody comes. Let's just keep moving, Barnes says casually, pointing his machete forward. It's all just woods here. Let's try to find something interesting at least. You don't think those chimes are interesting? I ask with some surprise. They're downright startling to me, but I try to appear calm, hiding my concern. Barnes glances at the wood chimes. Not particularly, no. Can we go now? He starts to lead again, slashing his way through more vines and branches. As we keep walking, I begin to pay much more attention to where I'm stepping, but I get distracted by some of the enormous, withered trees around us. Some of them are so old, older than most trees I usually come across on our hikes. They must have been standing in those spots for many centuries, completely and miraculously untouched by mankind. I'm not the only one that notices the trees. Cassie approaches one and puts her finger on the trunk, waving us over. What's this? Barnes and Jason are too uninterested to even bother getting a closer look, but my curiosity brings me over to her, to where she's pointing. There's something carved into the bark of the tree. At first, it looks like some strange symbol scratched through the wood, but the more I look at it, the more I can make out what it is actually depicting. It is a crude image of a headless human figure, with the head lying beside the feet of the carved silhouette. Well, what is it? Barnes asks impatiently, his machete anxiously rotating in his hand. I look back at the etching just to be sure that I'm seeing it properly. I think it's a carving of a headless person. Jason scoffs. Someone is really trying hard to scare people out here. But why? I ask. No one gives an answer, so I continue. Why would someone bother doing something like that way out here? People don't usually go out this far. But some people do, Jason says with a little laugh. So they still ended up spooking someone in the long run anyway. Good for them. Barnes and Jason don't even bother looking at the etching, while Cassie and I exchange equally concerned glances. I don't want to scare her, but I've never seen anything like it on any of my previous hikes. We walked for a little while longer as the sun started to set. The whole forest started to get absorbed by an ever-growing darkness. Small flickers of dwindling sunlight poked through the trees before fading from view, while distant storm clouds took its place. With how tall and thick the foliage was, the forest became very dim, but there was still enough light to see something unusual up ahead. There were shapes at the bases of some of the trees coming into view. What's that? Jason pointed at something to the right, and we all followed his gaze to a structure that was built up against some of the trees. It was a small hut, built from wood and stone covered in moss and leaves, and it wasn't the only one. Many nearly identical huts stand beside it, all packed into a small cluster. We then noticed fire pits outside each hut. People are living this far out? Whoever those belonged to, it sure didn't look like they were living in luxury. Those huts are rudimentary, like something you'd see in a history documentary, not in real life, and especially not in the middle of the Cascades. There are no power lines to be seen anywhere, and no real modern technology at first glance. What is this? Cassie asks quietly. Oh, come on, Barnes says, going up to one of the huts. We've obviously stumbled on something old that has just stuck around over the years. Maybe this was some Native American village that no one ever discovered, or an old settler camp. We might even be able to make some money by discovering something like this. I appreciate his optimism, but I don't exactly share it. And I have a good reason to doubt his belief that it's just some old abandoned village. I examine the ground in front of us. There are footprints all over the place in the dirt and in the mud. Prints that would have long been washed away by rain if it really was as derelict as Barnes thought it was. I carefully walk over to one of the rudimentary fire pits outside one of the huts. It's nothing but a circle of rocks with ash piled up inside. But when I hold my hand over it, I feel a little bit of heat rising from its center. This place isn't abandoned, I say, sharing my thoughts aloud. Someone's been here recently. Maybe more hikers, Jason says. It's a good place to have a little camp when there's literally nothing else out here. He points at the huts. At the very least, it's got some good shelter. Cassie practically gasps. You want to stay here? Why not? Jason counters, pointing up at the darkening gray sky. The sun's gone down, and it looks like it's going to rain. What's wrong with having a safe place to stay for the night? At the very least, we will be dry in those shacks. I'm unsure of his plan, even though I see the appeal of having a solid roof to sleep under. It's better than we've had on most of our excursions. There's just one part of it that he apparently isn't taking into consideration. And if the people that were staying here come back? Jason shrugged. Then we can just explain to them that we were just hiking. We needed a place to stay for the night. Worst case scenario, they kick us out, and we are back to business as usual. That didn't seem like the worst case scenario, but I understood the point that he was making. Something venturing out where you weren't supposed to be meant taking risks. I understood that, but something about those huts didn't sit right with me. It's just hard to imagine that people could actually live out in the middle of the forest, days away from any sort of civilization. But who were we to judge, since we willingly decided to go out this far? You've got this all figured out, don't you? I asked dryly. Jason shrugs. I know that hiking to places like this is your thing, but when it comes to wanting to find a place that's comfortable to stay, I've got that part of it covered. We should make this work if we can. For all we know, if anyone was staying here, they were probably just passing through like us. We all start to pick out huts that we are going to be staying in, making sure they aren't already occupied. Hey, Cassie taps me on the shoulder, trying not to alert the others. She points at the entranceway of the hut she's looking at. Just beside the small door hole, carved into one of the stones that make up the hut's structure, is another drawing, an identical one to the one we saw on the tree. A stick figure standing beside its own head. I don't like this, she says. I can only nod. I don't like it either. We take some time to look through those old huts, making sure they are empty and stable. There isn't much inside of them, besides some beds made out of grass and leaves, but no sign of modern technology whatsoever. If there were hermits or homeless people living there, they apparently didn't have many possessions. I lay in my sleeping bag staring up at the roof made of leaves over my head, the one fragile membrane protecting me from the rain outside. I try to get comfortable in my bag, but every time I glance over at that messy grass bed, I can't help but wonder who it belongs to. Who was the last person to come to this place to sleep? And how long ago was it? I don't want to be woken up to someone wondering why I stole their bedroom. It's that thought that works to keep me from sleeping. I can't stop my brain from pondering all about the strangeness of our current accommodations. And then I hear strange noises coming from outside. It's probably just raindrops or the breeze, or even the rustling of leaves. Whatever it is, though, it isn't helping me fall asleep any faster. I get up and go for a walk. It might be the only way to clear my head and give me some peace of mind. Barnes is sitting on a nearby stump with his machete still in hand, just looking up at the trees. Can't sleep, he calls over, keeping his volume low. I don't respond to him, though, because I still hear those other sounds. They aren't just coming from outside the hut, but I hear them coming from deeper in the woods. I close my eyes and focus on my own hearing, focusing on the strange sound. There are whispers out there in the darkness. I can hear them, just barely, but it's audible. I close my eyes even more tightly and try to listen to what exactly is being said. But what I hear doesn't sound like words, at least not in any language I know. Whatever is making those noises, or whoever is speaking, it sounds like they're getting closer, nearly at our camp. What's wrong? Barnes startles me. I hold up my finger to signal for Barnes to stop and be silent. I tap my ear and motion for him to listen with me. We remain in that spot, just listening to all of those murmurings out there among the shadows of the trees. I don't think we're alone out here. Barnes lets out a nervous laugh. Oh, come on. I don't buy that. Is this because of that thing carved into the tree? Or the tripwires? Listen, I mutter pleadingly. Just listen. Barnes barely tries to listen again, shaking his head in disbelief before he even tries. He only waits for about 5 seconds before throwing his arms up. I think you need to get some rest. You're starting to hear things out here. I turn my attention back to the murmurs in the dark, and those whispers are suddenly gone. There's nothing besides the gentle taps of raindrops and Barnes trying to hold in a laugh at the sight of me. Seriously, go get some good sleep. I don't do as he says. Instead, I start to wander and explore the camp a bit more. I don't stray from the huts where my friends are sleeping or where Barnes is goofing off with his blade. I slowly venture around the perimeter of the area, but I keep an eye on the direction where I hear those weird noises. My eye catches something in the dark just above me, and when I look up, I see 2 skinless, bony faces grinning at me. There are 2 human skulls hanging just over my head. I stumble backward and I fall on my back, staring up. An old tree looms above me, and the skulls are perched at the end of its branches. And they aren't alone. Dozens more human skulls have been lodged at the tips of that tree's branches. They all stare down at me in their deathly silence, as if waiting for me to join them up there. I try not to vomit as I wonder how those decayed heads even got up onto those branches. One thing is very clear to me. No animal did that to those people. The carved image of that headless figure standing next to its own head comes to the forefront of my mind. That's what it was referring to. It wasn't just a drawing. It was a warning, a threat to anyone that came to this secluded part of the forest, so far away from civilization. I can't bear to look at those skulls impaled on the tree branches anymore. I rush back to the group, gasping for breath. I shout to wake up Cassie and Jason as they hurriedly rush out of the huts. They all look concerned, and they have every right to be, more than they know. What's wrong? Barnes asks, brandishing his blade. What is it? I manage to speak through my heaving breaths while panic completely takes over the rest of my body. These little huts, the rope alarms in the woods, those drawings. I don't think it's from hikers and campers passing through. I think there are people who still live here, and I think we're trespassing. It's all suddenly so clear to me, and every fiber of my being is screaming for me to run, to take my friends and get as far away from this place as possible. I was the one to convince them to leave the trails. I was the one that got them to follow me deep into the middle of nowhere. I was the reason that any of them came to begin with. I brought them here. Maybe I was the only one that could get them out. If I can't do that, then we may never leave this place alive. We aren't supposed to be here, I whisper. I knew that was true. I could feel that in my core. Get your things. We need to leave. Right now. Take a breath, Jason says dismissively. Just breathe, okay? You're freaking out right now. We just need to talk about this first when you have a clear head and aren't freaking out. Suddenly, a sharp pain in my calf sends a wave through my whole body as I fall to my side. I look down to where the pain is coming from and find an arrow sticking out of my leg. It doesn't look like any arrow I've seen before. It is crudely made from a stick, and the feathers look like they've been intricately cast into place. I can only stare at it and wail in pain, my whole body trying to process what's happening. Oh my God! Jason cried out, his eyes growing large with fear. Oh my God! Cassie and Jason are at my side in moments, but Barnes stands a short distance away, drawing his machete and pointing it in a few different directions. Whoever shot that arrow, you think this is funny? You think you can do whatever you want just because you're way out here? At first, he's shouting into an empty forest, an empty void of trees. But then, appearing from almost nowhere, silhouettes grow visible through the drizzle and the brush. There are 10, no, maybe 15 shadows standing all around us, lingering among the trees and bushes in all directions. It's hard to make out their faces or any defining features from where they are standing in the rain, but I can see long, wet hair draped over their faces and torn, tattered clothing hanging off their bodies. Most of them stand with their arms at their sides, not moving a muscle, but I can feel their stares on me, on all of us. Barnes bites back his fear, preparing to negotiate. He keeps his machete raised, making sure he's presented as a threat if he has to be one.
Look, whatever it is you people want, you can have it. Just let us go, and we will get back to the trail. We won't bother you again. I'm sorry we came here. We didn't know.
A shape suddenly appears behind Barnes and grabs hold of his waist. It's a man, lanky and tall, with long hair falling down from both his head and his face. It's hard to see the person beneath that mane, but I catch a glimpse of his eyes. They are narrow, focused, and look absolutely full of rage. Barnes' hand snaps, and the stranger takes the machete from his grasp. Barnes is pushed down onto his knees as the long-haired figure has one hand on the machete and another hand violently grasping Barnes' hair. Barnes is wheezing in pain and crying out, but the figure over him doesn't seem to care. With a single smooth motion that seems to last for hours in my mind, the blade of the machete is dragged across Barnes' throat. Blood immediately rushes out of his throat, and I watch the light leave my friend's eyes. He's staring at us, shock plastered all over his face as the machete he loves ends his life. There's blood, so much blood. It's spilling out of him as the man digs the blade deeper and deeper into Barnes' neck until his whole head comes off. My friend's face rolls into the muck, leaving a puddle of blood in its wake. That image we saw carved into those tree trunks becomes very real. The message is clear. This is what happens to trespassers. Cassie is screeching while Jason is lost in absolute terror.
This isn't real. This isn't real,
Jason mutters over and over. But it doesn't matter how many times he says it. This is very real. If we don't do something, they are going to claim our heads just like they claimed Barnes's. As awful as it is, and as terrified and shocked as we are, we can't worry about that now. We can process it later once we first make sure that we don't join him.
We need to go,
I groan through the pain in my leg.
We need to go right now. Where?
Jason bumbles.
Anywhere but here.
I use his shoulder to heave myself into a standing position as best as I can. The two of them try to support me as I point in the only direction where there doesn't seem to be any of those people standing. We hurry as quickly as we can, thankfully in the direction that should eventually take us back to the hiking trail. We are so far from there, though. We ventured so far from the trail markers that it'll take a while to get back to any sort of civilization. With my hurt leg, I'm not helping us escape the people who killed Barnes either. Cassie trips beside me. Maybe it's from another arrow, but then I hear that horrible sound of jangling wood again. She tripped over another one of those alarms that they set up. Somehow, those alarms seem so much louder than when we first found them. It's almost like they are jingling through the whole forest, alerting the entire universe to the fact that we were trespassing and had no business being there. They echo and sing, rattling and clanking together. In some twisted way, it almost sounds like the wilderness is laughing at us. Cassie climbs to her feet, tears rolling down her face as Jason keeps trying to help heave me along in the direction that we came from. I look over my shoulder and find some of those shadows pursuing us through the trees. I even see the glint of a blood-stained machete as the man that killed Barnes is not far behind, no doubt hoping to add us to their collection of heads. They're fast, moving much quicker than we're able to, especially with my injured leg slowing us down. They're upon us, and the tall one with the machete sends Jason to the ground with a kick. Without my friend's shoulder to help prop me up, my injured leg buckles under my weight, and I find myself in the mud as Cassie is tossed aside with a shriek. The figure towers over me. It looks at me with no remorse and no empathy. All I see is pure hatred radiating from his eyes. He wants to kill me, just like he did to Barnes, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm hurt, I'm tired, and I don't stand a chance against him. The man wraps his dirty fingers around my throat and then lifts me off the ground with one hand, to the point that even my legs are dangling a few inches from the earth. He lifts me high and then holds up the machete in his other hand, letting me see the red drops still falling from it, reminding me that that blade just killed my friend and I was next. The others like him are all standing around us like spectators. They're enjoying watching this, enjoying seeing the results of this little hunt. They knew we couldn't get away. They knew they could punish us however they'd like for trespassing. I wish we had never gone this deep into the woods. If we just stuck to the trails like everyone else, we never would have crossed into their territory. We should have paid more attention to those warnings and turned around so much sooner. But I loved the adventure and the thrill of discovery too much. But sometimes, discovery isn't always about finding something good. Sometimes it's about finding something that isn't meant to be found.
Please.
I choke out through his grasp.
We didn't mean to. We're sorry.
He doesn't care. He brings the sharp side of the machete up to where his hand is choking me, placing the blade against my skin. I can feel the wetness of Barnes's blood as the blade touches me, and I know I'm in the last seconds of my life. But I don't want to die. I have to get Cassie and Jason out of this godforsaken forest. I need to find a way to salvage my friends' lives. My survival instincts take over, and I allow my most primal urges to kick in. We are in the middle of the forest, so far away from civilized society. This isn't a place for reasoning and negotiating. This is a place for violence and survival, where nothing else matters except being strong and resourceful enough to see tomorrow. I refuse to let my severed head be put onto some tree branch. Functioning solely off of adrenaline and sheer will, I take hold of the wooden shaft of the arrow in my leg and I pull as hard as I can. It tears out of my calf, sending a jolt of agony through me. I quickly regain composure, and in one swift motion, I bring the arrow up from my leg and ram the sharp end straight into the man's throat. Blood pours out onto the man's lengthy beard, dyeing it red. Those hate-filled eyes soften for a second with surprise as his fingers loosen around my neck and drop me to the ground. A moment later, he falls over motionless as he takes his last blood-gurgling breath. The others like him all stand around us, but their gazes seem to drift from us to the man I was just forced to kill. They start to speak to one another in a language I don't recognize, the same language I heard being whispered in the forest. The sound they make to talk to one another are guttural and foreign. One of them walks over to me and to the dead man beside me. He plucks the arrow out of the man's neck. I wait for him to put that arrow back in me, to finish me off, especially now that I killed their friend. Instead, he just glares at me, then at the corpse next to me before turning away and walking into the darkness of the forest. The others join him, fading from view as if being called back into the woods.
What just happened?
Jason asks. I can barely speak. I try not to break down into hysterics.
I don't know.
I have a feeling that we'll never truly know. All I care about is getting back to safety, where we aren't intruders marked for death, where we won't be beheaded for simply trying to find a place to sleep. Jason and Cassie help me to my feet and sling my arms over their shoulders. We hike in complete silence, but with more vigor and determination than we have ever hiked with before. We have never been more determined to reach our destination. No one knows what to say, but we all have the same goal, and we don't stop until the rising sun shows us the first trail marker. A wave of relief washes over us at the sight of that blue mark on a nearby tree. We all sit there for a long moment, just sobbing, as the sun rises over the beautiful woodlands and hills around us. I look out at the forest beyond, where somewhere a small village dwells. A village of savages. They're out there, probably mounting Barnes's skull to that tree right now, and resetting those tripwires, just waiting for someone else to come along. I'm just glad we're back on the right path. This will be the last time I ever stray from the trails. There are things in these woods that I wouldn't even call human. No, not after what they did to Barnes. They're savages. Cold-blooded savages. We're just lucky we survived. Follow the trail. Never leave it. Never. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.